Hi Mia, how's it going?
How are you? Did you have a good weekend?
It was good. I'm actually in Vermont for
Oh,
another for
I,
another client. I'm over at the National Life Building in Montpelier.
oh, that's funny. I'm headed there for a meeting on Thursday. But yeah,
Yeah.
have you been to Vermont before?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But this is my first time in the summer, which is really nice.
It is so nice here. It's funny,
Yeah,
like when you're here in the summer, you're like, why doesn't everyone live here? And then you get through like a winter and like mud season, you're like, oh, that's why.
I get
You know.
it. I get it. Yeah.
But yeah,
Um,
nice. That's
I'm
great.
just I'm just quickly organizing all of the um responses that we got.
Okay, yep. Yeah, I know there's a lot, so go for that. Yeah.
Yeah. But it looks good. I'm excited for today.
hmm Yeah, I realized we didn't talk about how to fit me into this peer review thing since I didn't write anything for this, but
Mhm.
I have thoughts. So if there's a way to, I don't know, maybe team up somehow. And actually, John didn't get an assignment specifically, so we'll have to figure out how to. I mean, it sounds like we're gonna mix up these groups anyways afterwards. So I guess there's two of us who didn't write something, but will want to be integrated into the process. So I'll leave that to you
Mhm.
to facilitate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be just asking you to start wherever you'd like to start and then go through, and you might be reviewing at the same time as somebody else, but I don't think that that's a big deal at all.
Yeah, no worries.
And I got a note from um I'm blanking on his name now. John McCormick.
Okay.
That he does have a specific public comment. So
Oh
I
yeah, I
think
did see that.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't. I'll leave it up to you in terms of facilitating whether we can do that at the end or if it belongs in the demographic review section. I don't know if it's not like specifically about that outline, but I don't want to get in the way of it. So however you want to manage that, I just we'll have to keep to the 10 minutes if it's at the in the middle.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Welcome everyone.
Hi.
Hi Pike. Just taking a second. Thank you all for sending your outlines over. I'm just taking a second to organize them so we have them in one place. But I hope everyone enjoyed their weekend. I was telling Mia I'm actually in Vermont today, so I'm over in Montpelier and just marveling at how beautiful the scenery is today. I mean, it's getting a little rainy, but it's just really gorgeous. So
Where are you usually from?
usually I so either in Boston or in Florida. Yeah. Welcome everyone.
I think we have a quorum, but I'll give it another minute or two just to see if we can let people filter in. Okay, well, in the interest of time, I think I'm going to call the meeting to order. I think we have a quorum, so hopefully we get a few more joining us, but it's good to start with. So welcome everybody. As a reminder, as always, it would be great to have EAG members on camera if possible, and members of the public off camera unless they're speaking and giving a public comment. And again, microphones off while the unless directly speaking would be helpful. And as just a final reminder, the chat is for administrative use only. And if someone puts in a comment, then Ashira will have to read it out, and that slows down the whole process. So that would be great. So I'll run through the agenda really quick. We'll review the minutes as always. Updates from Dominic from the PUC, the technical advisory group update. Then we'll go into reviewing our report outline and the demographic sections that EAG members submitted. Ashir is going to lead us through a process to keep adding content and prioritizing. We'll have public comment on that, and then we'll check in with our subgroups for the questions on public outreach, then the equity framework updates, and then we'll talk about the EAG tag communication, and then sort of feeding into that will be a discussion of upcoming credit decisions and what we could potentially have the credit subgroup work on next. Then final public comment, and then we will do next steps and a close. Any questions about the agenda? Okay, moving right along. Reviewing the May 14th meeting minutes, I noticed that they look correct, but it does still say April 30th on them, but I believe it's correct otherwise. So I think if we could just have that corrected, that would be acceptable. Are there any other questions or comments about the minutes from the last meeting? Okay, hearing none, I would like to ask for unanimous consent to approve the meeting minutes from the May 14th meeting with the correction of the date on the minutes. For unanimous consent, could I have everyone raise their digital hands? Okay, seeing consent from everyone who's raising their hands, I will say that those meeting minutes are approved. Thanks, everybody. Okay, next, I'm going to turn it over to Dominic for updates from the PUC. Thanks.
Hey everybody, hope you had a good Memorial Day weekend. I've got 4 things for everybody today. The first is that I want to provide a little update on S305, which is the PUC housekeeping bill that was combined with some of the edits made to the CHS legislation. On Friday, so May 24th, it was sent to the governor. He has 5 days, which my understanding is -1 weekend day, to either sign, veto, or let go into its effect without a signature. So we will know this week on the fate of that measure. Any questions related to S305? Alrighty. The next thing I wanted to mention is last meeting, Matt Koda offered some suggestions on how to refine the plain language overview of CHS that was produced by the PUC a couple of weeks ago. We incorporated most of Matt's suggestions directly, one of which on the cost, we did some further editing to incorporate his perspective and suggestions, as well as the view of the PUC. So there is an updated section on there, which I believe is accurate and universally acceptable. The other thing we did with the plain language overview is added a section for low and medium income cutoffs. Basically, we use the phrase low and medium income, but had not defined it anywhere on that one pager. So we dropped in a table we made from HUD data on household size and low income and medium income cutoff. To be clear, that is not any official determination. Individual cases would still need to go through whatever verification or attestation process is decided by the program. But as a general, here's what low and medium income means. We've got those numbers in there. Any questions or comments on the plain language overview update? Alrighty, hearing none. The next thing I want to mention is the straw proposal on pacing. As we've taken this new approach, we've been using a lot of straw proposals to approach tough policy questions. The straw proposal on pacing has currently been finalized and will be issued early this week. We're a little behind on issuances just because of the holiday weekend. But that'll be going into the case in EPUC 23-2220 rule, which all of the EAG members are automatically subscribed to. If you're a member of the public and want to check it out, you can subscribe to the case as well using EPUC, or just check it periodically for new documents. That'll be going in shortly. The most important piece for the EAG in this world is the question of LMI front loading. Basically, the legislation allows the PUC to require a higher percentage of low and medium income credits to be retired earlier in the program above the statutory minimum. Unfortunately, that was not addressed in this straw proposal. After discussion of the commission, they decided to delay and will be tackling some of the LMI credit issues a little more holistically later on. So when that is coming up, I'll make sure to let the EAG know, but it does not exist or is not contained in this straw proposal. The EAG is not being directly asked to respond. This is, I think, a little more in the tags wheelhouse, and we know that there are a couple public commenters who have some strong opinions on that. I want to make very clear that individual EAG members are encouraged to comment on this. If you read it and you've got an opinion, please file it. As a member of the public, you are all Vermonters as well as members of this group. So we would very much appreciate your perspective on it. If the EAG reads the straw proposal and feels strongly about the need to respond as a group, you are welcome to do so. I'm not sure if that is exactly what this group has envisioned for the time that we have left, but that is an option. Individual responses would probably be more appropriate in this specific situation. The comments are due in 3 weeks, so June 18th, I believe, is the deadline that will be made official when it is issued. Are there any questions or comments on the straw proposal on pacing?
I have a point. Oh, sorry.
I see Srini with his hand, then I'll go Matt and then Mia.
So, Dominic, thanks for the update. So just a general question. I knew that there was a deadline in May 18th or 19th for both EAG and TAG to submit an initial memo with respect to clean heat measures. What is the outcome, or what is the process, or what is the next step from that May 18th deadline?
This was for the ownership, correct?
Yeah.
I have it in my notes that we're going to be having that conversation during the later portion of the agenda. I'll look to Ashir or Mia if we should talk about that now or wait till.
That's okay. I can wait. I can wait if it is scheduled.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I have an answer to your question. I will give it when we get to that point on the agenda. Thanks, Srini. Mia?
Yeah, just a clarification. When you said that EAG members could comment as the public, are we participants in the case based on, how there's like a separate track for people who are participants and just members of the public? I can't remember how that's listed on the docket or what people should do.
Usually in PUC cases, that distinction is important. Since we are in a rulemaking case, it is not important. The reason I say like listed as participants is because you need to have basically I'll call it a profile on the case for you to be able to submit, you need to have your name in the case to submit the comment. But there's not an important distinction for this rulemaking case between participant, party, public. We are taking all of the comments in the same way.
Thanks, that's helpful.
We got Matt, then Pike.
Yeah, Dominic, you do a good job of this, so I hope you can do it again for me. Can you describe succinctly what the scope of so we can direct our comments, the scope of the pacing study is about, and what should the focus of any comments be?
Absolutely. I'll provide a fairly high level overview right now. The straw proposal, when it's issued, has I would say a pretty darn good intro to it. Our colleague Deirdre took a little bit of a new approach, and I think it's going to pay off. Pacing is the question of how quickly do credits need to be retired under this program to meet GWSA goals. I've described it before as we have where we are today and where we need to go according to GSWA, and we have to draw the line between those 2 points. This memo looks at the shape of that line, the changing carbon intensity standards for fuels that are required under law, and how the PUC wants to approach ratcheting the CI down over time. And it also talks about the process for adjusting and extending obligations on this 10-year horizon that's required by law. So it really is asking how many credits need to be retired and how quickly do those need to be retired to meet overall programmatic goals.
Got it. Excellent. Thank you.
Of course. Pike, I saw your hand was up and it just went down. You're up if you've got anything to say.
Yeah, I just had a question. So I'm on the request for input page now, and I don't see the pacing information. Did I miss when it would be out, or?
It just hasn't been published yet. If you're a participant in the case, which I believe you are, you'll receive an email notifying that something was posted. I can't put it on the website until I have the link to it. So as soon as it is officially issued, it'll go on the request for input section of the website.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty, any other questions related to the straw proposal on pacing? Alrighty, the one last thing I wanted to mention, on August 8th, I believe it's August 8th or August 6th, is the Rural Development Summit from the Council on Rural Development. The PUC has a panel for clean heat at that summit. We are looking at what we want to use that time for from both an educational and a feedback perspective. And one of the things we are looking for is someone to join members of the commission, as well as people with a little more of a technical perspective on that panel to talk about the clean heat standard and what its development has been like and what its impact will likely be on Vermonters. We're looking for someone who has generally been engaged in the process and is considered either a community leader or an advocate in this space, someone who would be able to bring that perspective to the panel. If there's a member of the EAG who's interested in filling that position and talking about CHS at the Rural Development Summit, definitely interested in that. Or if there's someone someone in your network who is or can by August become familiar with the inner workings of this CHS process and would be able to speak from that community leader or advocate perspective, we'd really like to hear it, to consider them, to have them on the panel we're expecting most likely a commissioner and then someone with some technical / policy background to it. I'll take either questions about that now or some suggestions, either your own name, someone in this group, or someone you know of in your network would be a good person.
Where is it, Dominic?
Let me do a quick Google for you. I don't know off the top of my head. One moment.
While you're Googling, I would just say I'm down in Manchester. Sorry for being off camera, setting up for the Vermont Energy Conference. Anyone in the EAG is more than welcome to attend. It's a trade show, and one of the seminars at 3 p.m. will focus specifically on the clean heat standard. That's at the Equinox in Manchester. You can find it at vermontenergyconference.com.
Much appreciated, Matt. We'll definitely be keeping our eye on that. Thanks, Mia, for dropping the leap. It is at Vermont State University in Randolph on August 6th. All right. If anyone now would like to volunteer themselves or have a name to throw out, I would very much appreciate that. If nothing's coming to mind now, but something pops up later, feel free to shoot me an email.
Yeah, I don't want to put my name in the hat now, but I will look at the website on the Rural Development and get back to you on it.
Sounds good. All right. Well, if there's any names that come to mind, please shoot me an email. We probably have a little under a month to get this all coordinated. So earlier you shoot me a message, the easier it is for us and to get that person up to whatever speed they need to be at to be on this panel. Absent any other questions for the PUC, I'll turn it back over to Mia.
Thanks, Dominic. Okay, so now we have the update from our TAG liaisons, Emily and Matt.
Thanks, Mia. I have a pretty quick TAG update. In the last TAG meeting, Opinion Dynamics gave an update on their TRM work. If TJ Poor from the department also gave a presentation on the emissions profile of the grid, which will be continuing that discussion on Thursday during the next TAG meeting. We also discussed credit ownership at length, working on the memo that was due on that day, and noted general differences in the EAG's memo to what the TAG had discussed, but didn't really get into the specifics of those differences yet. But I know the TAG memo was shared with this group in advance of this meeting. And that's about all I had. I'll hand it over to Matt to add anything else.
Nothing else. Covered it well. Thank you, Emily.
Okay, are there any questions for Emily or Matt about what the TAG is doing? We'll talk a little bit more about TAG engagement in light of the credit ownership discussions later in the meeting, but if there's anything else on what they're doing, let me know.
I had a quick question about what work the consultant's doing, and maybe the TAG knows and could fill us in briefly.
Pike, are you asking about the measure characterization study or the potential study? There's two contractors. Okay,
I'm talking about the carbon intensity value and how measures are going to be calculated. And I don't know which consultant would be working on that.
I think it's a little bit of both. I'm happy to share. We didn't really talk about in the last meeting the potential study too much, but happy to give an update on that. And then in the last meeting, we talked about just an update of the measure characterization work, but I think what you're talking about is the potential study. Do you have any specific questions about that, or just?
Well, there was conversation and discussion about, what if GREET was going to be used and which version of GREET was going to be used, and wondering if those discussions have moved forward at all.
I would say that is very much a main topic of discussion, and TBD. I don't have too many conclusions to share, but if anyone else was listening in, or Matt or Dominic had anything else to add, feel free.
I am going back to their materials for last week because I have a vague memory that either at the last full group TAG meeting on May 16th, or it might have been the full group meeting on the 2nd, the Opinion Dynamics, who is the PUC's consultant rather than the department's consultant, who I think is what you're talking about, Pike, responsible for basically doing that calculation of before minus after difference in GHG. my memory serves, they had finalized their measure list, as well as the different fuel pathways that will be calculated into the individual clean heat measures. I do not believe they have said anything about the details of that calculation yet, any of the outcomes. I know that, biomass and other, gosh, I don't know what the right term is, organically derived fuels are front and center in that conversation, but they have not come to any conclusions or specific carbon intensity numbers for those fuels.
Thanks.
And I think that list is actually, I'm positive that list is part of the public tag materials, the updated measure list.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions on the tag, we'll move on to the report outline. Thanks everyone who submitted materials. Ashira is going to guide us through a process of how we can review those, add relevant material that we're missing, and figure out what we should tackle as a group and start getting started on a work plan. So I'll turn that over to Ashira. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Mia. And before we dive straight into that, I did want to take the liberty. I realized that we don't have a facilitator update section, and I have a quick update that I wanted to share. So we have been talking about having, as we're getting more and more into the actual writing and sharing of materials and all of these sorts of things, we're starting to have a lot of different resources fly in from different places. And so we have created a kind of library to be able to put all of the resources that you might find while you're doing research, so that they're all collected in one area. So I'll go ahead and share that with you. And I'll also share it in the follow-up email after today's meeting. There you go. And let me share my screen so you can see it as well. Okay. Hopefully you can all see that now. So it's just a basic table where we can put different links to different resources. If you have a document that doesn't have an actual link, Dominic has said that we're able to upload it and host it on the PUC's website, and then we can link it from the website to this document. And basically, this is not at all a place to collaborate or work on any type of work product or anything like that. It's really just a place to put any kind of links or sources that you find. So Dominic, I want to double check with you. Are we asking participants or members to send information to me and then I'll update this, or is it okay if they update directly? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. I believe it is all right for people to drop links in here. Just these 4 boxes, and just what is needed to fill this out. This will, going forward, be a part of the materials that we release and post for the public on a weekly basis. Like Ashira said, I want to reiterate, this is not a place to work on written products or collaborate on substance, merely a library so that we all have access to all the resources we might need to do this job well.
And so we ask that you write just like what the name of the resource is, a quick, very, very quick description, and the link and your own name so that we know who to follow up with. And
if there are any, sorry, if there are any materials that you have that there is not a publicly accessible link to that you would like to add to this library, shoot Ashira and myself an email. Please make sure that both of us are on it. And I'll put it, I'll use our website's backend to host the document there.
Awesome. And so that will also because I know that there can be some confusion about what resources are coming from me, what documents are coming from different people. So hopefully that will help clarify this, and we can direct people to this document if we have any questions. Are there any questions about this in general? Great, I'll take that as a no. And a broader conversation that we can continue to have is, so there are many different documents and many different resources. And as we continue, we're going to have more and more conversation about how to weigh each document and things like that. So I think that this is also a really great way of making sure that it's all very clear who documents are coming from, what they so that there's no waiting or anything like that. So as long as we're good on that, I'm happy. And then we can move over to the demographics collection. So thank you so much, everyone who filled these out. These are really great, and you did exactly what I said. There's varying levels, but it's really, we have a very solid starting point now for this outline. So I'm going to share this link with you. And let me know if you have any access issues as well. There you go. So I've gone ahead and really roughly compiled all of the outlines that we received. My apologies for the formatting. I got them last minute, so they're just kind of thrown in there. But what we are going to do today is take some time to go through and begin reviewing the different sections. And so we'll do kind of like a peer review and start adding some of our thoughts and comments. Later today, we'll have a little bit of a prioritization exercise so we can start thinking of, some of these conversations we already know are going to be longer conversations than others. So start thinking of how we might want to order that, where we might want to get started. The goal is that as we keep moving forward, I think we only have about 7 meetings left with me as the facilitator. And I really want to make sure that before I leave, you are on a very solid ground. So as we're moving forward, making sure that we can take a section each meeting or a few sections each meeting and really do some deep dives so that we can have the best collaborative process as possible before we really have to get into the details of report writing. Let's see. Emily, I see your hand.
Yeah, we don't have to solve this now. I can just read off of your shared screen, but I am not able to gain access to like a Google account. And if you don't have a Google account, it won't let you view anything. So yeah, I don't know if there's a setting we can do offline for me to get access to it without a Google account.
Awesome. Okay, I'll work with you on that. Thank you for that. And if that's a problem for anyone else, please let me know because we do want to make sure that everybody is able to access it.
Sure, just yeah, I have a Google account and it's saying I need to request access. I think it might be a settings thing because I'd be able to access other documents we don't have to do this right now, but it might not just be Emily.
Yeah, there we go. Now it should be a lot easier. Thank you both for bringing that up. Okay, so you should be able to get in now, and I see all the little anonymous creatures filing in.
I'm good now, Ashira. Sorry.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks for bringing it up. So what we are going to do is that I'm going to ask that you find the section where your name is. So find the section that you wrote. And we're going to start at the section that's underneath the one that I wrote. So if I was Ben, and I wrote about the household homes that are not ready to access the heat measures, I would scroll all the way down past mine and start at Jen's. And once I'm in Jen's box, I'm going to go up to the top, change the color that I'm writing in. So you can do that by clicking on the A that's on the formatting toolbar. And you can change it to any color you like. Blue and purple are the most legible, so probably one of those. And you can go through and add additional comments, thoughts, questions that you might have. Just make sure that whatever you write, you tag it with your name right after it so we know who wrote it. And so we're going to take a few minutes to do that. And as you finish one, you can move on to the next one at your own leisure. And I think we are running a little bit ahead of schedule. So let me see how much time we can have for this. So I'm going to say, let's take 15 minutes to get started on this, and then I'll check back with you. So we will go until 1:19, just reviewing and writing notes. So does everybody understand what we're doing?
So sorry, Ashira. So are we taking one section that each of us contributed to and adding comments, or are we picking a topic and adding comments from everyone?
So you're starting at the section below your own. And you're adding any comments, questions, etc.
Okay.
And then when you're finished, when you've like read through that whole section, you can move on to the next one. You don't have to stay in the one that you're at.
So can I ask a more of a process question here?
Yep.
So the suggested 15 minutes that we are trying to do here for collaboration, we have to do the collaboration live. Is that the intent?
We do have to do it live, and that's because of open meeting laws, so that because we can't collaborate on live documents outside of this meeting.
I see. Okay, got it.
So right now, because I'm able to record everything, we're gonna put it online. And then after this meeting, I'll go ahead and switch this back to so that I'm the only one who has access to it. And so then we won't run into any meeting law issues.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Emily?
So a real quick question. Do you have any clarification on the notes? Like, I'm assuming we're not doing like grammar and actual writing notes. Is this just high level responding?
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, if you see one that you absolutely can't avoid, then go for it. But this is mostly the big picture questions. Yeah, Chris?
So I have my report for mobile homes, but I didn't put it in this document. It's a little more verbose. For this purposes, could I just use put my comments on other sections? Because I think mobile homes and these other groups overlap considerably. Or
Yeah.
does that make sense?
So then instead of starting at mobile, so you can start wherever you'd like, and then Mia, if you want to start at mobile homes, that might be a good place for you to start.
Sure, I can work there.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Ashira, I'm sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
Can you relink it in the chat? I just logged on through the computer.
Yep. And I'm working on making it so that you can see more of the pages at once. Just figuring out how to do that.
Shira, I just noticed that I think the section under Jeff Wilcox's name, I think is my submission to this.
Okay.
Not sure if that got mixed up, but
Thank you. Yeah, I was adding them very quickly before the beginning of this meeting. So
sure. Yeah, no, I was like, wow, this is remarkably similar. And it's, I think actually is what I put. So yeah, just wanted to point that out.
Okay, great. I'll go ahead and change that. Who's Jeff? Jeff's not on. I don't think we have one from Jeff yet. So Ben, if you were working on that one, you can just go ahead and skip further down.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I was actually looking at Jen's currently, but
Okay. And just to remember, once you've written any comments, just making sure that you write your name beside it so that we know who to follow up with. I'm gonna go ahead and add in. I think Chris, you just sent me the wrong document at first. Okay, no worries. So adding in Chris's as well. Yeah, and if you've already read the section that's directly below yours, just go ahead and move on to the next section. You can continue at your own pace. Okay, thank you for taking time to do that. And so I'm going to give you another 5 or so minutes just to quickly, I know that it's a lot of information to digest, so to quickly scan through, and if there's any sections that you haven't seen yet, just look through them and kind of get the flavor for what was already written. Okay. So we only have so much time today to work on this, but as we said, this is going to be an iterative process, and we'll keep revisiting these frameworks and these thoughts, these outlines and these notes. One of the things that I want us to think about at the very beginning is, now that we're starting to see a little bit of a bigger picture and where some of these sections might be going, is there anything that we're missing? Are there any sections, like overall demographic sections, that we're missing? Anything, not so much on the framework, because we'll come, like we said, we'll come back to kind of like the overarching goals a little bit later, but really on groups and specific people. Is there anything that we're missing? Mia?
Yeah, I added this to the bottom, but someone, one of the public feedback sessions mentioned that schools and municipal buildings may also struggle and wouldn't be considered a low and moderate income household, but they do serve the community. So that's something to probably think about, how this might impact them.
Give me a good point. Anything else that anyone else can think of? Matt, I see a thumbs up.
We have a section for small business and industrial in there, because both of them would be, residential and industrial, or residential and commercial broadly, are going to be, subject to the clean heat standard. So seeing the municipal buildings and schools, that, I think same train of thought there, the commercial industrial space.
Anything else? And we can continue to think about this. I think as we go further, things will pop into our mind. So one of the things, well, first of all, I do want to check in with the group, just as this is our first time seeing all the information. How are we feeling? What thoughts are we having? What's any reflections, any surprises?
There's a ton of overlap in between all the sections.
Kind of overlap.
I think a lot of us wrote about the same stuff, which is great. Everyone comes at it from a different angle. So,
Jen?
Yes, my question is, how will we, since these are outlines, how will we start to fill out our own sections? Can we come into this document and put in, so should we just continue filling out our own sections and then come back to you with those documents as we add information?
I think that if you have specific information that you'd like to add, I think that that's always great. So feel free to send that to me. The next exercise that we're about to do is a prioritization exercise where we'll figure out what are some of the sections that we know are going to take extra time, extra collaboration. Some of these are like somewhat straightforward, but some of these, there is a little bit more debate. There's going to be more conversation that's needed. So we're going to do a quick prioritization exercise around that. And then as we keep having more meetings, we'll focus on specific sections, or, we may have to have task groups and things like that. But yeah, thanks. Does that answer your question, Jen? Okay.
Yes.
Jeannie?
So I have a couple of process questions or suggestions, I suppose. One is whatever summary I have submitted for small businesses is based on what is already out there in the public domain, right? I don't have a specific technical or a business interface with any small business community. So any other specific this sector or segment related discussion or data or questions would need further engagement, right? I consider myself as someone, very independent. I'm not part of any organization. So I'm just curious, like, what is in terms of, let's just take the small business as an example, in terms of trying to connect the dots and figuring out what the critical steps are for the next phase. I'm not clear. I'm not sure. I have some ideas on how to go about getting more specific information. So that's just one question. The second question I have is, we have focused on these groups because we think that these groups have some unique challenges or disadvantages from an equity perspective. At the same time, I would like to know how, from a clean heat standard definition design point of view, how the technical group is thinking about these groups or sectors. So at some point, we have to see, how the clean heat measures actually mean to these specific groups. So I just wonder at what point we would need to think about those.
Srini, I think your second question is a very good question, and we are going to touch base a little bit about that when we have the conversation about just EAG, the EAG and TAG responses, and what does it mean if the EAG and TAG recommendations differ. So I think we should kind of pick up that conversation there, where if the EAG and the TAG have differences, what does that mean, and what can we do now to kind of think through that? For your first question about process, I would love to hear process recommendations. This is really, this is you. This is the EAG who's writing this, and this is your process. So I really want you to own that. So I know that we're coming close to time. But if you have process recommendations now, some short ones, let me know. I see Matt's hand, and we also have to do a quick vote. But if you have any, let me know. And if you want a further conversation, happy to have a further conversation with you as well. So any specific process recommendations now?
I'll come back to you on that. I do have a couple of thoughts, but I need to kind of outline my thoughts on that. So I'll come back to you. Thanks.
No worries. Sounds great. And Matt?
Yeah, thank you, Sherry. Just to highlight an overlap and to reiterate what many of us that have been working in the space know to be true and have struggled with finding solutions for, which is the rental problem, where the person that, Pike noticed it, Emily noticed it, I pointed it out, which is where a renter pays the fuel bill and doesn't own the home. It doesn't have the same incentive structure because it's in the landlord's hand. That is not a solution. That's not as easy a solution to come by in 7 meetings. Are we to just point out the flaw or the issue with that? It's one of those wicked problems that exists no matter what the energy policy mechanism is? Or are we to come up with suggestions on how to address the inequity when a renter who has no control over its heating system or the fuel bills is left with higher prices? What are we to do?
I think that's a perfect question. I have 3 points on that, and three different points. So the first point is just on the 7 meetings, because I don't want everyone to panic too much. The 7 meetings are how much longer you have me for under the contract, the funding mechanism that's bringing me here. But you still have meetings and you still can continue to refine and report. I think you're meeting until January of next year. And so you do still have time, so I don't want people to panic on that. But I hear you. It's how do we go about this? How do we continue to have these conversations and make it so that in such a short amount of time? And that question I would reflect back to the EAG. And I would also say I think it will be helpful to do to keep that in mind when we're doing the prioritization exercise, just to make sure that that might be something that you want to prioritize, so that we have more time to speak about that in the upcoming meetings. Pike, and then I'll move us into the exercise.
Yeah, so I'm not real familiar with all the building codes out there, but I was wondering if one solution to that question would be requiring, high efficiency or replacement heating systems that would meet the needs of the clean heat standard built into building codes, so that property owners would need to upgrade appropriately when required.
I think that's a really good thing for further discussion. I have gone ahead and moved this document so that it's view only, so no one can collaborate on that anymore, but you can still access it to be able to read it. And then I'm going to quickly launch a poll. So let me stop sharing.
As Ashira is, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ashira.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, as Ashira is setting this up, there were 2 questions I heard from Matt and Pike that I do not have a complete answer, but a little bit of an answer. First, to Matt's question, is the task to identify issues such as the incentive structure for renters or come up with a solution. I think by virtue of seeing that issue and having a report, the EAG is absolutely should mention that issue. But for a efficacy and quality of program, suggestions on how to overcome that would be wonderful. If there's a suggestion from this group of people who are selected for their experience in the space, that is probably a better answer coming from, these 10 people rather than the people who are, chugging away at 100 different things on the PUC side of it. So definitely should identify and mention it, and having suggestions on how to overcome it makes this a potentially better program. To Pike's question about building codes, there is an entire office, the Department of Energy, who works on this kind of thing, and it comes down to which building codes are adopted by the state. The PUC is not responsible for that. I am not sure who in the state of Vermont is responsible for choosing which building code we use, but I'll do some quick Googling and see if I can find a quick answer.
Yeah. And like I said before, this does sound like, a reason for further conversation, a more in-depth conversation. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and launch this poll. So you should see a screen that pops up with a few different choices, the choices of the different sections that we had. So I'm going to ask that you pick 2 that you'd like to prioritize to talk about earlier. So either next meeting or in the upcoming meetings. So really think through things that you think might need further conversation from this whole group, and longer over a longer space of time. And please remember that this is only for EAG members. So anyone else, members of the public who are joining, please do not vote in this poll. And I can see who has voted and who's not. So okay, so we have 6 people who voted, and we have 1, 2, 3. Okay. Should be good. Okay, so is everyone able to see those results? And I'll speak them into the room as well for the recording. So we have 4 people who voted for households or homes that are not readily able to access clean heat measures. 4 for low-income households, 1 for LIHEAP recipients, 2 for moderate income households, 1 for manufactured homes, 3 for renters and rental property owners. So it looks as though the consensus is starting at the homes that are not readily able to access clean heat measures and low-income households. So thank you for participating in that. That's helpful information as we start creating these next upcoming meetings. And please, 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 if you have any ideas about process, please get in touch with me. Very happy to hear them. Great. So I'm going to hand it back over to Mia. Actually, I think we're at public comment, so I'll go ahead and open it up to public comment. Does anyone from the public have any comments that they would like to make? Please remember to keep it at 2 minutes at the beginning if you can, and so that we can get in as many people as possible, and we'll circle back to you if no one else has comments.
I'm John McCormick.
Go ahead, John.
Yes. I'm sorry. Let me turn off there. Now, before I begin, I wanted to repeat a comment that Secretary Moore made February 23. I'm concerned the desire to do something, anything, is causing some to overlook or ignore the unknowns related to the clean heat standard. Hard questions can and must be asked without being viewed as opposition to progress. Now, my hard question is straightforward. What is the equity in penalizing LIHEAP clients beyond their means? They cannot pay their fuel bill without LIHEAP's subsidy. Now, I'm obviously opposing requiring LIHEAP clients and, frankly, low-income families having to pay additional for their heating fuels. But I'm not against progress. I have written and now have bipartisan support among 2 legislators in the House and the Senate who will introduce a draft bill that would expand weatherization assistance program. That is the solution for meeting the objectives of S5 without going through this whole process of making the rule. We have an existing organization, LIHEAP, needs weatherization, and the Weatherization Assistance Program provides that. It reminds me of a little boy, bicycling home from school, going past an overpass, and there's a huge 18-wheel truck stuck under the bridge, and the workers are about to cut off the top of the truck, and the boy says, no, wait, just let the air out of the tires. Well, that's, to me, what expanding weatherization assistance program is. It's the simplest way to get the job done.
Thank you, John. And before we get any responses, I just want to check to see if we have any other public comments. Great, okay. If anyone has any thoughts or responses for John. Go ahead, Chris.
I really appreciate the calling out LIHEAP and the weatherization assistance program. Just through my own kind of outreach, it's really been eye-opening how reliant upon these two programs that we are for that just transition and just the gaps that even the existing programs have. It's really been eye-opening, and it's an area of focus I hope that we can consider in our recommendations and influence on TAG is how can we bolster these programs? There are existing delivery programs that are okay as now, but if we're going to get to the path or the goals that we want to accomplish, status quo doesn't seem to be cutting it. And these two programs address the exact demographics that we just reviewed. So I really appreciate John's comments, and thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Any others? Go ahead, Mia.
Yeah, John, I'm just curious, have you coordinated this with the Office of Economic Opportunity and asked for their feedback in developing this proposal?
Yes, in fact, Jeff Wilcox invited me to their regular meeting of all the partners, and I presented the draft to them, and I got essentially a wide acceptance, because what this draft would do would increase the salary of weatherization installers by $10 over a several-year period. It would bring their pay scale up from about $20 an hour to $30 an hour. And Jeff Wilcox and others all agree that the reason we're not attracting enough new applicants to the weatherization program is the low wages. Difficult job and low wages. So increasing it from $20 to $30, how do we do that? By increasing the existing fee from 2 cents to 4 cents to 6 cents to 8 cents over several years. 8 cents compared to the possible 70 cents a gallon that is considered likely, and though people say, well, that's the back of the envelope, nobody has ever come up with a real number to challenge Secretary Moore's 70 cents a gallon estimate. So have I reached out to OEO? I reached out to the Jeff Wilcox and his 5 partners who provide the weatherization. And again, I got favorable comments. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Shira for the next agenda item, which is the public feedback work that we've been talking about. Thanks.
Great. So this is just a moment to taking us back, thinking about there was a request for questions from the EAG, specifically for the public facilitation. So this is it. Do we have any questions? Has anyone thought of specific questions that we'd like to ask? Okay.
Didn't we have a list of those already? Because I did review those and I didn't have anything to add. So there was just wanted to clarify that I hadn't, not that I didn't think about it, I just didn't have anything additional. Just wanted to clarify.
Go ahead, Mia.
Yeah, so if we had this long list of questions, I think it was agreed that that would be, you know, we would be better situated if we could trim down the list of questions and highlight what we really wanted to know from these public engagement sessions to make it more likely that they would be incorporated. So this group has feedback on kind of our most pressing questions that we could really only get from the public and not from published materials or stuff that's already available. I think that's worth considering, preferably sooner, because the next meeting will happen on, I think it's the June 7th. So we're running out of time if we did want to get ourselves involved in that process. And just a reminder to mute, please, if you're not speaking. Thanks.
Ben, do you recall what the document title that list was in? I'm not seeing it on an initial search of my materials.
A good question. I have looked at probably hundreds of documents since last week, and I also can't recall, but I know it's out there somewhere.
Yeah, Jen. Yeah, I believe. Yeah, go ahead, Jen. I think you know where it is.
I might be saying, I think it was the report from the subcommittee when we met for the public input.
I think you're right. Yep.
It was the very end of that document, I believe.
Yes. Share thoughts on me sharing my screen to put this up in front of everybody?
Go for it. I'll give you permission. Okay.
Okay. I just want to make sure for people who are on the subgroup, this is what you were talking about.
That is the list. Oh, sorry, Mia. Did you?
Nope, I was just confirming. I think that that's what I was under the impression we were discussing, how to narrow this down and make it more useful. But yeah, these questions were what was last submitted by the group.
Hi, Jen. I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I think the first three questions are ones that I had proposed as initial questions, and I know we added some after that. The first three are more general, so they're not, I could see those being asked in the public forum of people that are speaking, because they're not personal. They don't ask about income or certain amounts that they've spent. They were more, the first three are just general questions about to elicit feelings, how people had about their general heating, were there barriers to any type of transition or to reducing their costs, and just a general idea, was anybody worried about an increase to their heating costs for whatever reason?
Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, just going off what Jen said, just highlighting that not to be asked during meetings after those three first questions. Some of those questions are, pretty personal, and I think the intent of our breakout group was to not ask those in a public forum. So just wanted to highlight what Jen was saying.
To clarify, is it just the first three that you did not intend to be? Are there any of these questions that are thought to be asked in a public meeting? I'd like to just make a little note for myself, the difference.
Go ahead.
I guess I would
go ahead and speak it. Yeah.
I was suggesting that the first three could be asked, that if someone came to speak, these are the kind of comments we're eliciting. And the other ones that are more personal would not be the type that you would ask in a public meeting. And of course, people don't have to answer them either. If they're there to give some input, they don't have to ask the questions. But this seemed to frame the type of questions we were thinking people might come and speak about.
Go ahead, Mia.
Kind of a modification of the second bullet point, but I guess I'd personally be interested in sort of like, what would it take? Like, for instance, and kind of both barriers and benefits. Like if we're asking people to electrify their homes and reduce their dependence on fossil fuels, like what would people in these meetings sort of feel that they would need to make that happen? I think that would be helpful and potentially cover some blind spots that we might be missing.
Thank you, Mia. Dominic, were you able to capture that? Seem going to work. Anyone else?
I would, Ashira, I would just add that for many, well, for everyone, it's not just electrification. There are clean heat measures that have nothing to do with electrification. And so make sure that's broad enough to know what could they be doing with biomass, with biofuels, weatherization, as well as electrification.
Matt, I recorded as decarbonize/reduce carbon intensity/electrify. Do you think that covers the range?
Absolutely.
Could
Thank you, Dominic. Chris? Yeah.
Just a quick comment on like the question itself is fine the way you captured it, Dominic. If there's a way we could convert that into like a plain language. Just thinking, when you say decarbonize, like what the hell are you talking about? Like, I just, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Great. And so now with these, because I know the ask was to find like 2 or 3 that we could send to the public engagement facilitator. So yeah, I guess I'm flipping it back to you. What's the next steps on these? Do we want to send all of these to the public engagement facilitator? Are there a couple that we want to highlight?
Ashira, who are you asking that of?
The EAG. Or Dominic, if you have thoughts as well.
I'll take a backseat to any EAG member who has an idea. Otherwise, I do have a suggestion. Unless there's any more conversation about these last 2 sections, I don't think it's a problem to send a longer list as long as that list is properly prioritized. So I could see something like, and then PUC staff could bring this into this form. Say, okay, here are the first 3 questions. We would like these questions to be incorporated into your public engagement work. The exact amount that Curtis does that will be up to him as a professional, but these are priority from the EAG. They'd like to be incorporated. Other questions that we think might inform the conversation are this section that I have highlighted here, the ones with the subsection. Not an explicit ask, not the priority, but if you're looking for fodder, here's a great source of it. And then this question on percent of income spent on energy costs. We could add in for his private conversation. I know he has other conversations with different constituencies in the state outside of those public meetings. So this could be one, be like, hey, information that the EAG thinks is valuable for the PUC to have as you go about this work. So that would be my suggestion on how to communicate this to the consultant.
Thanks, Dominic. So 1, are there any other different thoughts? Anybody countering Dominic? And 2, is there anyone who would like to take this on to be able to send it? And to be clear, we would be sending this directly to Curtis, or
If a member of the EAG wanted to put that into its communicable form, I would say we would send it to Aaron and Curtis, put that on an email. If no one from the EAG wanted to volunteer to do that, I could throw something together pretty quickly, and then I would pass it through Aaron to Curtis.
Okay. So I'll put it back to the EAG. Does anyone want to take this on? And I'll count in my head to 10. If there's no volunteer, we'll go ahead and give it over to Dominic. Okay, Dominic, I think that's yours. Okay. Perfect. So moving on, we have Chris, who is going to give some feedback from the equity framework subgroup.
So I sent everybody a copy. Apologize for the late delivery, but everybody should have a copy of the amended rubric in your emails, and I can pull that up here. So just at a high level, Jen, Ben, and myself met as a subcommittee. We kind of reviewed the tasks assigned to us based on some feedback Emily shared of, basically like, what am I supposed to do with this thing as far as the equity rubric. So that was shared, and we had I thought I was questioning whether we were going to spend the whole hour on it, and it went by pretty fast. And we actually found that we probably could have spent more time on it. So we addressed that, and I tried to capture the spirit of that in the document. But I thought it was a fun exercise that we started using our own rubric and going through the last tag straw proposal, just trying to do it ourselves. And it quickly, and I think this meets the objective, and I try to communicate that in our based on our notes in the instructions of the whole point of this is really to force that conversation and capture from your perspective how the proposal, whether it's an action or a measure, it's not really like designed specifically for an action versus a measure, but it's really just to force that conversation, because just between the three of us filling it out as we were going, I read it this way. Well, I interpreted it this way. Well, and you quickly found discussion, and that discussion was the whole point, and highlights the importance of gaining multiple stakeholder feedback in the policy design. And really, I mean, this rubric, if not used in the policy design, it's not really meant as a tool after the fact. This should be something that's done as the policy is being designed and considered prior to taking action, so that you can document, hey, we know that there's going to be harm, and here's our narrative about how we're going to address it. Or, oh, wow, I didn't think about that harm. Let's go back and revise that policy. So should I share my screen and kind of walk through the changes? Let me do that.
Go ahead, you can do that. We are running a little bit behind schedule,
yeah,
so
we'll make it super quick here. Sorry, I just gotta pull it up. And I didn't review the actual edits with Ben and Jen yet. This is just based on our conversation. So this is not a final draft, but everyone should be able to see this now.
Yep.
So I did track changes. I just updated a revision date. I put a link into the guiding principles. I think that's just an important document that really is foundational to everything that we're doing here. And I did add a couple in the whereas. The guiding principles defined equity. So I just called that out because out of our conversation, it was this would be something that is part of the design process. So these principles kind of outline that here. Just talking about the difference between procedural, contextual, and corrective equity. And just, I think one thing, just as this group, we throw around the word equity a lot, and sometimes it's, well, what do you mean? How does that mean to you? So this just adds a little more definition. No changes on that. So there was discussion on the therefore. We offered this rubric 2. We struck item 4 to assist delivery agents and obligated parties. The focus group really is the POC and the tag, because this is through the design process. So, and then amended the instructions. Just, we originally we took this from the address transition rubric, just really to understand the impacts of our choices. Really, it's just to have a conversation. And then there was some confusion about the questions and just the way it was formatted. So just putting the questions instead of question 1, we actually put the questions down here, and then eliminated the actual score. So you're really just indicating, does this policy create a harm? Is it neutral, or is it benefit? That's it. So there was no question changes, except we did incorporate 2 of the feedback from Pike regarding on the accountability section about was it clear about the harm? So I won't get there.
And I see, Pike, you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, maybe it's too late, but there was a third one that somehow I either didn't convey or somehow didn't get in, and that would be number 11. Are potential beneficiaries of the proposed action clearly identified and disclosed?
So we did discuss that.
Okay.
The reason it was not included was it was more of a, yes, we agree of communicating the beneficiaries, but just the way that we interpret it was this document was more focused on just identifying harm instead of highlighting the benefits. So if we misinterpreted that, but that's why we didn't include it.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, if someone is, or some organization is unduly benefiting from this, or even duly benefiting from it, that would be important to know. That was my thought, so.
Oh, I see.
Oh yeah, we'd love to put in this heating system for you. And if they're gonna recoup a whole bunch of clean heat credits for it, that might be important to know. Just so that the parties who are benefiting are clear.
But that seems more reasonable when you explain it that way. So I think maybe we could certainly add that in if the group was amenable.
Yeah, maybe there's I'll think about different ways to phrase it, but if folks think that it's important in theory, I'll work on it, and if not, then I'll just let it pass.
Mia?
I'm still wondering about sort of sharing this from the tag and the total, like you still have a scoring component, and I guess I'm a little concerned that the tag is going to come right back to us and say, like, what are we supposed to do with the scoring thing? You know what I mean? It says like total in the bottom. It still says that in your version, right, Chris?
We can strike total if you think that would be more clear. It's really just the intent is we just want you to identify that there's harm, yes or no.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just some. I don't want to create more work for this group, but maybe just something that de-emphasizes the idea that there could be a score, or it's supposed to be, because we ran into the issue of these might not all have the same relative harms, among the numbered items. So I just think it might still be missing some guidance about like literally how to use it so we can avoid future questions from the tag and the PUC potentially on the process of using this. Thanks.
Jen?
Yeah, when we talked about it, we talked about that language that came under the instructions was to really emphasize the fact that this was a jumping off point for discussion, so that it's not that it would be scored or that numbers would be added up and whoever got the most points would win. It was a way to bring in a series of questions that different stakeholders could be asked to reflect on whether the action or the measure takes into account different communities and different people's interests. So maybe we can emphasize more in the instructions that it's a jumping off point for discussion. It's to bring in equitable questions during the formation of any type of action or measure. And just allowing people to have the chance to ask questions maybe they wouldn't think to ask, and then come back before they take their straw poll or before their discussion, so that they have in front of them what they thought about when they went through this rubric for the discussion section of their meeting.
Thank you, Jen. Emily?
Yeah, fully support Jen, what Mia and Jen just said, and adding on to both of their points. I think sometimes for me, it's helpful to read examples of how something could be used. So like in the instructions section, I can envision if I was thinking about how to use this and I needed more clarification, a sentence or two being like, for example, the TAG or the PUC could use this document, just as Jen had said, before a discussion to prepare for a discussion. I think just having a sentence or two with like examples is helpful to think about how to use things.
Thank you, Emily. And so it's sounding like everyone is basically on the same page, but just with further more specific clarification on how to use this. How do we want to move forward? Because I know I don't envision that we want to wait another 2 weeks to go through this a second time. So are there any
I have an idea I'd like to submit to the group. I wrote up a fairly short motion that I think captures the discussion. So I want to repeat how have heard this discussion going, and if I'm accurate, I'll drop this in the chat for someone to use if they would like. Basically, people like the update to this framework and generally would like to adopt it, but feel that there are some fairly minor changes that could be made to clarify the usage of it, specifically removing the total at the bottom and adding some more language to the instructions, possibly with examples. Is that accurate summarization of the conversation that we're just having?
I see many slight head nods. Yes.
Okay. And Chris, would you be willing or otherwise in a position to make those minor changes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then I am going to drop in the chat for anyone who would like to make it a motion that apparently the format of chat doesn't like. So give me 20 seconds to fix this. All right, just dropped it in. If whoever sees this and would like to make the motion has some edits, that is totally fine. I will make those in my notes.
Is there anyone who would like to make this motion? No pressure, but go ahead, Mia.
I'll make this motion. So I move that the EAG approves the presented update to the equity framework with minor changes that clarify the intent of this rubric to be used as a discussion promoting document, possibly with example uses. Once those changes are made by Chris Trombley, the EAG communicates this rubric to the TAG and the PUC. Do I have a second on that?
Mike, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just had a question. I just wanted to make sure that no one else thinks it's important that we know who benefits from the proposed measures.
Would that be included in the minor changes? No,
it would not. So how we could deal with that suggestion, Pike, is according to our rules, a second is not needed. So Mia has made the motion. We would then move in discussion. Pike, if you would like to offer an amendment to add that to the motion, I can write some language for you real quick. We can have a discussion on that. We'll get a vote on if the group wants that to be included. Once that vote is taken, then we can move to voting on the whole thing. Pike, through in the chat, are those that will benefit from the proposed action clearly identified and disclosed? I will take that and put it into motion language really quickly, but I believe we can start that conversation, the discussion on that point now. So I would recommend, Pike, a brief repeat of why you think it is important to include. And then if anyone has any other questions or comments, then would be the time, then we can move to a vote.
So again, I think it's important for transparency that we and everybody understand who actually benefits from certain measures. Yeah, and I think that's just implicit, but I think it should be explicit, should really be defined and made transparent.
Then is everyone, oh, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I was just curious, like what the intent of the question is. Like I mean, it's pretty clear that like an installed measure in someone's house is going to benefit them. If we're looking at more of a policy related question, we took credit ownership, for example. I mean, I guess that makes sense. I just don't know, if we look at credit ownership as just an example question of, and applying it to this proposed question, like, I'm not sure, like, does it matter that we know who benefits? I mean, it's just a question of intent. Like what, if an obligated party is going to gain credits from installing a measure, I don't know why it matters that we, someone's getting a credit. Like just trying to like delve into like why we need the question added. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to benefit. I think it's probably more important to identify harms. We want to make sure we're not harming anyone through the clean heat standard. And I think, there's, a ton of potential benefits as well. But, so if we can eliminate as much harm as possible, then those that benefit from it, I think would probably reduce overall program cost and, increase participation.
Srini?
So in a simplistic fashion, the way I think about Mike's question is, let's say hypothetically, the credit ownership does not belong to the property owners. The credit ownership belongs to some other people in the network. I think that has got the potential to harm the property owners if the credit ownership does not belong to the property owners. To me, that's a very simplistic way of thinking about it, saying, it is obviously not benefiting the property owners, it's benefiting somebody else. So I'm not really sure. I mean, from a policy perspective, I can see how high-level decisions, it's important to capture that. But as we go into the more details of measures, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how. I think it's implicit who's going to benefit, but I'm not sure whether asking that question every time on any details of the clean heat measures design is useful. So,
thank you, Srini. And Pike, I see your hand. I also wanted to pull to your attention, Dominic has created the motion for you in the chat if you'd like to read that as well.
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to like make transparent all the possible hidden actors. And one example that comes to mind here in Burlington, Burlington Electric is proposing a district energy system. One of the beneficiaries of those clean heat credits is going to be Vermont Gas. That is not readily apparent in all the documents that Burlington Electric has provided thus far. And it seems to me that such things should be disclosed.
Thank you, Pike.
Unless there is further discussion. Oh, I see Ben. I'll just get this out and then Ben, turn it to you. Unless pending further discussion, I would recommend that Pike officially move the language that I put in the chat if he so chooses. And then we can move to a vote on that before we zoom out and discuss and vote on the overall update. But Ben, I want to give it to you first.
Sure. Yeah, I was just, I think that's a good example, Pike. I just don't know, like from an equity perspective, I'm not sure. Like in that example you gave, like, I guess, does it necessarily matter if Vermont Gas gets a credit? I guess, yeah, I guess what you're saying is like transparent. I mean, I think transparency is a good thing. So, but would this open a can of worms where it's like, we're now trying to track credits like all the way up the stream? I don't know if we want to imply that. I see what you're saying. Like, it's good to, if let's say if you're talking about the Burlington McNeil plant, if, in this case, if clean heat standards enacted, the McNeil plant is, still being decided on, then, Burlington would just basically be required to say, Vermont Gas gets some of those credits, I think is what, to really distill it down. I suppose that would make sense to me. Yeah, I don't know how it would apply to like a lot of other scenarios, but or what we'd necessarily do with that information. But yeah, just a thought. But yeah, I'm happy to vote on a motion.
So I move that a motion is amended to include additionally the questioner, those who will benefit from the proposed action clearly identified and disclosed. So it is added to the rubric.
And there is no second, so I think we can go ahead and take a vote. Would all those in favor of Pike's motion say aye or raise their virtual hand? And these would only be EAG members. Great, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so it looks like the ayes have it. Does anyone object?
We ask for all opposed. Please
all
raise your
opposed.
virtual hand.
Please raise your hand.
Oh, oops. Wait.
Okay. All opposed?
Got it. In the opinion of me, the ayes have it, and Mia Watson's motion is now amended to include the sentence. Additionally, the question of are those who will benefit from the proposed action clearly identified and disclosed is to be added to the rubric. When we move for a vote on the main motion, I will read it in its entirety.
And to be clear, Dominic, that's going to be modified by all added by Chris Trombley. Like that's a one section of the motion. Just to be clear,
it's just correct. I'll put this together and read out the full motion in just a second.
Okay, thanks.
So now we would move to discussion on the main motion, which now reads, and I will drop this in the chat so people can see it as well. The main motion now reads, the Equity Advisory Group approves the presented update to the equity framework with minor changes that clarify the intent of this rubric to be used as a discussion prompting document, possibly with example uses. Additionally, the question of are those that will benefit from the proposed action clearly identified and disclosed is to be added to the rubric. Once those changes are made by Chris Tromley, the EAG communicates this rubric to TAG and the PUC.
Thank you. So if there is no further discussion, we can go ahead and take the vote. So all those in favor, please raise your virtual hand. So it looks like 6, 7, 8 in favor. All those opposed? And anyone is abstaining? Okay, and it looks like the ayes have it. So great. Good job, everyone. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next piece, also chaired by Chris. And if we can keep it a little short, it's the broader conversation about the EAG and the TAG responses.
Sorry, I'm trying to blank on this section.
No worries.
Which meeting was this? I feel like they're all running together after a while here.
Yes, I'm happy to jump in a little bit and just get this conversation started. Chris, if my memory serves, this was basically when the TAG does something or when the PUC does something, how does the EAG want to respond? And this ties into the question Srini had at the beginning of the meeting that I said we'd get to. Here we are getting to it. Srini asked, basically, the advisory groups have made this recommendation. What is the PUC going to do with it? And I just wanted to give everybody a little of an overview of what happens now that we receive this. So we have the two-part document from the Equity Advisory Group. We've got the memo from the Technical Advisory Group. Those who are hawks on EPUC will have noticed Ken Jones of the Technical Advisory Group has also submitted a follow-up memo. We'll take all of those documentations, all of those documents, and go back and take the written comments and workshop that we had on credit ownership at the beginning of this year. And we basically put it all out in front of us and try to synthesize the points of agreement, synthesize the points of disagreement, move those into explicit policy recommendations. And then at the staff level, what we do is we put that into a coherent policy with outstanding or major questions. That goes up the chain through the PUC up to the commissioners. The commissioners will discuss it and make decisions on those final policy questions and making sure everything is aligned with their policy vision. In those discussion, it will be clear what the points of agreements were and where the points of disagreement comes from. By virtue of being a group, an advisory group, both the Equity Advisory Group's recommendations as well as the Technical Advisory Group's recommendations will be presented as such, and I would assume given extra weight in the minds of the commissioners. Once those conversations are had and that policy has been set, commissioners kick it back down to staff level to iron out any remaining creases or questions, and then it'll go back up to the commissioners for their signature. On the specific question of credit ownership, the commission anticipates that we will release draft rule language early on other policy topics that may or may not have direct impacts on subsequent parts of the program. We might wait to release that draft language until we release the entire draft rule. But that's the process that these policy recommendations go through, and I'm happy to answer any quick questions on that before I give it back to Chris. Hearing none, Chris, floor is yours.
Well, I think it just kind of, that really is for us. I mean, that's a perfect follow-up to the equity framework. So just like, what is the group's expectation here? Because this is our kind of our shot to have our voice included in there, and it's moving fast. And so, do we want we're the subject matter experts that were recruited for this. We're some representative voices, and we've reached out to our stakeholder group. Do we want to see our voices included faster, or is this really a wait until the end and they see a report at the end and it's kind of two dual tracks? It just kind of gets to this whole procedural equity piece of how was this considered in the early design, and we've got this framework that we all just approved with some great edits. How do we want to use this? It's more of a open-ended question for folks.
Yeah, and I think the thought really is, so I know that we've had some questions about this specifically with credit ownership, and I'm glad it's a broader conversation, so it's not just credit ownership, but just really the process of, yeah, as Chris said, giving input. And Dominic laid out really well that throughout this conversation, throughout this process, we have so many inlays into the decisions that are being made, even through just having this discussion that's recorded. Dominic's here. There's so many people from the PUC who are online listening in. So there is already that direct channel. But I guess my question is just, are there any specific questions and thoughts on this? Because I don't want to get too deep down the rabbit hole, but I do want to make sure if there's concerns that we do address those concerns.
So can I articulate something here?
Go for it.
I guess my understanding was that the framework would help us calibrate any type of design features around the clean heat measure early on to flag issues from an equity perspective. If I listen to the process that Dominic just outlined, I'm hoping that as a result of the process he outlined, there will be some communication on material decisions around clean heat standard, at least early on, right? So there could be several outcomes. One outcome is, no issues. TAG and EAG, have 100% alignment, agreement, and all the things that we have contemplated have been generally considered from an equity perspective, and it doesn't pop out with significant flags, right? That's one outcome. The second outcome is there are significant differences in the way we are thinking about the credit ownership. Let's just stay with credit ownership, right? That's the first thing that we are trying to get past as a milestone. And so what do we do, right? So these flags that we have, or the areas that we don't align on, are there potential equity issues? How do you find out? You apply the framework. The EAG can do that independently. The TAG could do that independently, or EAG and TAG could do it together and come back and say, PUC, this is what we find out, right? So I think we kind of need to roll the movie forward a little bit to commit to some expectations here. I'm not sure whether we have committed to what the expectations are in terms of deciding what is equitable, what is not equitable, and how do we get there. So,
Jeannie, just to dig a little deeper, when you say expectations from who?
I think expectations from PUC, right?
Okay.
I mean, both TAG and EAG have come out with some very material recommendations, and now we really have to think about how much effort we want to put right now into addressing how the policy decisions are equitable. Do we want to do that now, or is that going to be a end of the initiative exercise sometime early next year? I would say to avoid confusion, it should be done earlier, as early as possible. That's what I would suggest.
Jen?
Yeah, to follow up with what you were saying, I agree. We've shared what we think initially from the EAG. The tag is shared. Seems to me that what we need is some product from the PUC that then comes back to both the tag and EAG to then run the framework by it. We've just been dealing with hypotheticals, like we think maybe this should happen or that. We've shared that, but to really apply the rubric to a policy or an action that the PUC takes, I think it has to come back to us. We apply the rubric and comment on that policy as it comes out of PUC, rather than after the fact having a policy and then commenting on it. There should be, like you were saying, the timing is important, that we're able to comment before it becomes an official rule.
Mia?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue we have been given that opportunity. The PUC has sort of given us a straw proposal. So I don't think we've been, given no opportunity, nor do I think that there's any necessarily waiting over PUC is going to take tag at their word more than us. I think we'll be given equal weight in most decisions that are, at least to the extent that it's relevant for our group. So I do think, the decision cycles have been a problem in terms of, I asked the tag chair if there was an opportunity to collaborate, and that really just didn't seem like it was going to fit in their process. I think going forward, we could try to make that more of an opportunity. After this in the agenda, we're going to talk about front-loading credits, and that really might be one that makes sense to try to get the tag in front of, so we can sort of coordinate our decision making. But I don't think it necessarily represents like that our feedback is not being heard or it's not being prioritized if we don't coordinate with the tag. Like, I think it could create better decision making, but I don't think it means that this feedback from this group is not being considered if that happens, or if that fails to happen, I should say. But certainly would support trying to do that if we can.
Dominic?
Yeah, I wanted to support what Mia said and show that how it responds to Jen's concern. Decision cycles have been an issue both with advisor groups and within the PUC. As people I think are well aware, we had a new chair of the PUC was appointed at the beginning of this year. And of course, that comes with some new decision-making approaches. And so we've been trying to figure out a pace and a cadence that allows us to get the feedback that we need while also sticking to the timeline laid out by Act 18 and making sure that all three of the commissioners are on the same page and moving forward through these very complex topics. I see the EAG getting kind of like 2.5 bites at the apple. The first is when there are issues we see coming forward. And if the EAG is confident that they want to say something and make a position known before the PUC explicitly addresses it, absolutely welcome to do that. More realistically, the EAG will probably be in a position to respond to something like a straw proposal. We saw that happen with credit ownership. That was our first try at it. And at least from my perspective, I thought it went, though imperfectly, well. We get the feedback from EAG there. And then when we put out our draft rule, it's taking all of those straw proposals and putting it together into something that we intend to be comprehensive. And the EAG, both as individual members and as a group, will have a chance to submit explicit feedback on ways that that policy may or may not hurt people, could or could not be better. Then once we go through that, the PUC incorporates all of that feedback. We're going to send it to the legislature. And along with that, the EAG will be submitting a report. And that's what I'm calling the half bite at the apple. At that point, the PUC can't really make the changes, but the legislature absolutely has the opportunity to read what the EAG says in their report and say, actually, I think the EAG is right, and this piece needs to be tweaked. So I think, 2.5 bites at the apple. On ownership, the group has already taken one. There will be an opportunity for a second, even without additional discussion and voting on the ownership issue at this time.
Dominic? Any other questions, concerns, thoughts? Okay, well, go. I thought I saw some movement.
I was just, it's awesome you picked up on that. So like the credit ownership piece was a great example of just split opinion. That's fine. It's just, it rubs me the wrong way that, you know, we can have and if somebody could maybe set me straight a little bit, like why wouldn't the technical advisory group want to identify harm and cooperatively, proactively try to design an outcome that would address those harms up front? Like why go through the whole process of designing something without identifying that up front? Like, oh, you know, maybe I could have used EAG to think about the situation differently and then move forward. Just this parallel track is just frustrating. Like it almost feels like yeah, it's great. We understand there might be impact, but we're moving forward. So it's also making impacted communities felt heard in the process. And by not including that in the design process up front, you're not showing empathy for the impact to the communities that you're that it could be having, and sometimes it could be unintentional. So that's just one person's perspective, and I understand the PSC can reconcile some of that stuff after the fact. It's just why bother going through the whole design exercise and not think about that stuff up front, either that you don't want to or there's some time constraints. That's just saying it out loud.
Thank you, Chris. Ben?
Yeah, I think that's a good, I think your concerns are heard. I view it as though, just the fact that there is an EAG and a tag, that is kind of building equity into the process. So I don't know as though tag was saying, oh, well, we know there's a harm group, we're gonna just ignore it. I think they're looking at it more from a, they're tasked with, looking at it from a strictly, technical perspective. So, I know that I'm usually sitting in on all of the tag calls, and I know that, for example, they're looking at, questions about the infrastructure of the natural gas lines, the delivery structure for biofuels in the Northeast, the availability of green hydrogen in the Northeast, like where's the closest geographic point where hydrogen is being produced and stored, like in Western Pennsylvania, for example. Like so it's a really they're taking a lens of how physically is green hydrogen going to get onto the pipelines here in Vermont, and how will people be able to benefit. And so I think they're tackling those questions from that perspective. So I think actually the products that came out of the tag on credit ownership, for example, and then ours actually, are complementary to one another, because, of course, we're reacting to the same straw proposal. But, it's not our purview to, know about how molecules of natural gas flow in a pipeline. That's tag stuff. So, so that's kind of how they mesh together. So I think while it'd be nice that we're totally unified, I think in a way the tag is really relying on us to really tackle those questions in the same way that we are relying on them to know, all the specifics of, the physical properties of biofuel, for example. So
yeah, we'll go to Emily, and then I have one suggestion, but go ahead, Emily.
I agree with everything Ben just said, and I just wanted to add one comment that I think our tag chair Rick shared, was that we did also note the differences in the tag and the EAG memos. And again, we didn't have time to get into the specifics, but overall, we talked about what are the implications of that at a really high level. And Rick's response, if I remember correctly, is that is like a good thing. That's perfectly fine. I think looking at it in a complementary perspective and expecting the EAG to add that lens on top of the technical experience is like doing what the process should. And that was just my characterization of what was said, not word for word notes. But yeah.
Thank you, Emily. And what I'm going to suggest is maybe that, so the next conversation is pretty complimentary. So we're going to be talking about some things that are coming, some credit decisions that are coming down the pipeline that the PUC is going to be asking about. And maybe what we can do is start taking some of these conversations out of like the theoretical and more into the not physical, but the actual world. When we start thinking about, okay, so how does the EAG want to prepare for these conversations? Is this something that we want to, try to find ways to touch base with TAG ahead of time, or do we, are we okay with the complementary nature of having two responses? We don't even know if it's two responses. So anyways, I'm going to give it to Dominic to kind of tell us a little bit more about what these decisions are that are coming down the pipeline. And then maybe we can speak a little bit more about what implementing these thoughts might look like in actuality.
Absolutely appreciate it, Ashira. So the items coming down the pipeline are what I talked about at the beginning of the meeting with the straw proposal on pacing. As I mentioned, this straw proposal explicitly does not address the question of front-loading low and medium income credits. That is something that the PUC is absolutely thinking about, but we'll take them explicitly at a later time. The other items in this upcoming proposal are honestly more technical in nature. There are, of course, equity dimensions of it, specifically the rate at which this program requires decarbonization will have equity impacts, both in the price impacts on fuel as well as the unacceptability of the status quo. So there are some opportunities broadly, but I think a great specific policy question that we could run this process through is whether or not the PUC should increase the percentage of LMI credits. Just for a little bit of background, the legislation or the statute requires 16% of credits to be that are retired by obligated parties to be of low income credits, an additional 16% for moderate or medium income, and then there is about half of it needs to be capital expenditures. Basically, there has to be a physical improvement to either the building envelope or the installation of electrified heating and cooling. That is a question that the PUC has to answer that this group in particular, I think, has some very important insights on. In the same like bites at the apple idea that I talked about a little bit ago, right now we are before that question has explicitly been asked. If the EAG wants to form an opinion and communicate that with the technical advisory group or the PUC, you guys can be the first movers on that, and your comments, your suggestions will be the basis from which we continue to build. The PUC will then come to a straw proposal, whether or not the EAG weighs in ahead of time. Once that straw proposal comes out, we'll look for the EAG to react. We'll look for the TAG to react. And any coordination that you guys want to have there, fantastic opportunity to. Once those recommendations are submitted to the PUC, we're going to take that into consideration and put it into our draft rule. There will then be the opportunity to comment and make critiques on that draft rule. Thinking about this question, and because it has such direct impacts on the equity considerations of this program, I do think now is a great time to ask, how does this group want to approach that question? And at what points does this group want to provide explicit feedback?
Thank you. And I'll give a reminder, we have about 5 minutes for this discussion because we do want to keep time for public comment. So I'll go ahead and open with that note. Go ahead, Mia.
Yeah, it was my hope that, we could sort of be in advance of this enough to do some of the things that this group wants, like making sure that the full EAG group, not just the working group, a working group, has the ability to comment, and potentially giving the TAG enough notice that if we did want some sort of joint discussion, that would be possible in enough time. I want to be well out ahead of any straw proposal, I mean, a straw proposal would better inform the discussion, but I'm worried we'll get into another cycle where we just don't have enough time to make that practical. So I think it would be good for us to lay the groundwork. And I was hoping that the credit ownership subcommittee could be repurposed, because there have been a lot of discussions within that group about like how credits might work, that I think it's easier than starting from scratch. And just to note that that group had discussed trying to use the equity rubric on our credit ownership discussions. It's kind of past the point, but that was something we discussed doing and just never got to. So we could kind of do that sort of two-part continuing the work within the credit ownership subgroup, and sort of regularly meet with the group and roll it out to the full group as we kind of feel our way forward on that. So that's my suggestion.
I support that suggestion. I think that's great. Makes sense to me.
So I'm seeing a lot of little nods. Any differing opinions? A lot of support. Any other thoughts? Okay, so then it looks like it might be something that we can go ahead and make a motion about for the credit ownership group to be repurposed as a more general credit group. And I really don't want to be the person drafting the language. So if anyone,
Mia mentioned that, you know, maybe this is a topic big enough for the whole EAG, and I would concur that I agree with that. I don't know if it should just be a subcommittee discussion. Just throwing that out there.
Right. Any thoughts? Go ahead, Chris.
So I would like to avoid dueling letters if possible, if there are points of differences that we incorporate in the one letter if possible. And it, following on Pike's point, I think that would be helpful. Like, we bring forward a draft and then the entire group kind of adds into it. I want to make sure that language comes into one document. The whole kind of having to submit a separate letter was, I don't think it was an ideal. It was a result of what we had to do last time, but it would be nice to have that stuff integrated into one. Yeah. So.
Well heard, Chris. So are you suggesting like maybe 1 or 2 meetings of the credit ownership or the credit group to be able to draft amendment to bring before?
I think maybe we just have to talk about how we're going to use these next few meetings to accomplish this stuff, because that would require more time on the agenda. I think that's just the output there.
So to start this process within the full EAG group, not within a subgroup.
No, sorry. The subcommittee would bring out the draft, but we would bring it to the full group and allow more time to really incorporate that instead of a kind of an up or down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Jen?
I guess I just wanted some clarification. So this would be to use the rubric, the subcommittee would use the rubric to identify whether we want to increase the amount of LMI participants, and the question of front loading LMI participants, and then a draft proposal would come back to the full group, and the full group would use the rubric. Do we have a time frame that would allow both the subcommittee and the full group to use the rubric on whatever the subcommittee proposed on those 2 issues?
Yeah. And so I guess one of the decisions as well is by when do we want to have gone through this entire process of having the draft and then having the EAG as a full group review. Go ahead, Srini.
So I'm just curious. I mean, it seems like we are trying to wrap our arms around a problem. We are still trying to define how big it is. Why, with the memo from EAG and with the memo from TAG today, if we take those two memos side by side and look at credit ownership, can we look at it side by side and say, are there any flags as it stands today? And how would equity apply? And can we start there and be proactive as what Chris suggested?
So
I have not seen that side by side to say on credit ownership, where are we? As it stands today, as PUC deliberates and goes through their administrative process of coming up with a policy, we have a framework. Why not take the suggestions from the memo as it stands today and apply the framework? Either we do that from EAG with the intent of getting trained on the tool, maybe that's the first intent. The second intent is to look at the outcomes and say, look, this is what we are coming up with, and give a heads up to PUC as they draft the policy. So it seems like we are kind of we have a tool and we are not sure how to use the tool, and we're going to continue to wait. And why not work on something tangible and something that'll be more productive and useful to PUC in drafting the policy?
Srini, Mia, and then Ben, and then we will have to wrap up.
Thanks. It sounds like this is still an area of discussion, but I'm hearing general interest in finding a way forward on credit ownership, or sorry, credit issues in general. I guess I would propose that the credit ownership group be reformulated into a credit issues group, and potentially meet next week to sort of scope some of this out and come back to the full group next week to sort of come up with a plan on how to sort of deal with foreseeable credit ownership, or sorry, keep saying ownership, credit issues in the future that could be approved by the group in order to sort of keep this discussion going, but also finish in a timely manner. So I'm going to do my best. I'm going to make a motion that the credit ownership subgroup be reformulated into a credit issues group, and we'll meet before the next meeting to create a potential scope of its new work for approval by the full group next meeting. So that's my motion. Dominic, let me know if that's not acceptable. Can we hear discussion on that really briefly before we vote? Like, are we hearing general
I'll
enthusiasm?
open up to Ben first.
Thanks,
Has
Ashira.
had his hand up. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a brief comment that I think, with the credit loading, front loading question, I don't see that as like a massive memo that needs to be drafted. I mean, honestly, I think could be distilled down to like one paragraph. I mean, you could go crazy with citations and everything, but I think that one could be a pretty easily constructed memo for us to send off, because it's more or less a yes or no question. But and then on what Mia just said, I fully support that. I think that's a good idea.
Thank you, Ben. Pike?
Yeah, based on what Chris said, I just wanted to add a word or two to Mia's motion, and that would be just for discussion and approval towards the end there, so that there is a time to discuss, not just approve.
Instead of proceeding on a vote on that, Mia, if you agree, you can just ask unanimous consent to amend your motion for it to say for discussion and approval instead of just approval.
Thanks. Yeah, so can I have unanimous consent to amend the motion I previously made to say discussion and approval, not merely approval? I'm hearing general nodding. I'm going to take that as unanimous consent. So we'll move forward. We could lower hands, move forward with a vote on the entire motion of reformulating the grouping and rescoping. So if everyone's comfortable with voting on that without saying the entire thing out loud again, if we're all clear, I'd like for anyone in favor to raise hands on that idea, on that motion. Okay, and any opposed, please lower hands. Any abstaining? Okay, in my opinion, the ayes have it. So we'll work with Ashira to find a time for this group to meet, hopefully next week, and come back to the full group with a scope and tentative work plan of how we should proceed on credit issues in general over the next couple weeks. Great. So now I'm going to open it to public comment. If there is any question or any members of the public who have anything to say in the time we have left. Okay, I'm not seeing anything, so I'm going to send it back to Ashira for very brief next steps. Thanks.
Awesome, thanks. So for the next steps, Ashira will send the link to the resource library to the EAG. I will also send the link for the demographics group's document. Srini or any other EAG member who would like to will connect with Ashira about process suggestions for writing the report. Dominic will send the EAG's public engagement questions to Curtis and Aaron. Chris will update the equity framework with the new language. And we actually didn't decide who is going to send that and to whom. So
for the equity framework, Chris will send it to me and I can.
Okay, great. Then Mia, okay, additionally, and Ashira is going to schedule the credit issue group to reconvene. So thank you, everyone. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Mia.
Okay, are there any last minute questions or issues we haven't covered? Okay, hearing none. Great work, everyone. I think we covered a lot of ground today and have good steps moving forward. So we will call this meeting to a close.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Mia.
Bye.
Thanks, Ashira.